Hey guys, I think this is our first video lecture so far. I appreciate all the hard work that you've put in so far with these 3 weeks. I know it's been tough on you guys, it's been tough on me putting things together every day. Looks like we're in for another 3 weeks of it after we get back from spring break. I was pretty pleased with the way this assignment came out though. Um, I appreciate those of you who had gotten the things done on time because we included some of that stuff into the presentation. So let's take a look. Um, what we're really trying to take a look at more than anything is some of the differences between what good quality news looks like and what I guess news that seems to be more geared towards entertainment looks like. Definition of news: anything that a news gathering organization has learned recently that would be of interest to its viewers. So obviously, everything that you're getting right now is coronavirus stuff. Um, but I still think that that allows you, even though they're all covering the exact same thing, it does let you see a little bit about how the two types of news will treat the same issue. So let's start with the CNN and Fox News, the kind of stuff I call soft news. Um, Features of soft news are a couple of things. Number one, and you're not going to see this right now because there's plenty of newsworthy stuff, but when interesting things don't happen every day, and you've certainly had those times when you've tried to bring in a current event, it seems like there's nothing going on because there's a lot of these kinds of stories like, oh, look, a moose fell in a swimming pool. Like, why should that be on CNN? Why should that be on Fox? But you'll see it from time to time when there's not much else going because it's something that grabs people's attention. Um, but I think what these networks do worse is that they try to cover serious issues, but they do it so poorly that you don't end up getting a lot smarter. So what I'm calling soft news is also taking important critical stories about politics and world events and covering them more in a way that will either sensationalize or dramatize the story, try to make it more interesting and sellable to the viewer, as opposed to actually giving you the facts and analysis that you need. Most of what the media does, and this is an issue that lends itself to this type of coverage really well, is trying to create that fear and drama in an issue. Um, it's easy to do when it's an issue like a global pandemic, but you'd also find that ordinary political issues can be dramatized in a way to make them more interesting. Um, and part of the reason they do this is because it's easier to make stories sound more interesting to get views than it is to do the work of in-depth reporting. You can just go out and interview anybody on the street, and that seems like you're doing news. Um, Another common tactic is to simply report on exactly what happened. Maybe it's a president's speech, maybe it's a proposal of a bill. Simply report the facts. And while that might seem like a good way to cover news, what the viewer doesn't get is the sense of context that helps you understand it. So think back, this was a long time ago. I think I had asked you a question like this in class. The economy added 200,000 jobs this quarter. Is that good or not? And we had talked about, well, it's really difficult to answer that question unless you have the context, unless you know what counts for typical job creation. And so that's really the job of the media. Like, we need them to provide that surrounding information to help us understand what we're seeing. Soft news won't do that. It will provide you with information and then kind of leave it. It doesn't do much in the way of truth seeking or digging or analysis. If there is analysis, it's usually in a way that frames the story as partisan or argumentative because that's more interesting to viewers as well. All of these networks are profit focused. How do you make money off of the news? Well, just like you do with any show, the more people that watch the show, the more you can charge advertisers to put their commercials on the show. So they need eyeballs on the screen. They need you to be watching. And so that's their incentive to dramatize stories and try to make them seem like a bigger deal than they are. And to worry about the entertainment value of their show because they need eyeballs on the screen. Um, and the stuff that you guys looked at, oh, see, I would have had it organized right here if I'd have just waited a few clicks. Because they need eyeballs to the screen, it's going to affect the way they do their presentation. You end up getting worse quality news, and you don't end up as informed. And we'll look at these ratings. I've screen grabbed the graphs of what you guys had said in your survey, which I appreciated all of your feedback and comments on that. I think that helped. Hopefully, it helps you see the difference between the two, and you have access to what your results were for both of those stories. I don't know why that did that. Let's talk about hard news then. Hard news is the PBS style news. It's the important stuff. They're serious topics, important issues about politics, world events, the economy, society, but they're covered in a way that has a serious tone, an analytic tone. There's a bigger depth of information and analysis than you would get on with a soft news story. It takes a lot of energy to create stories like this. Like, you have to have a good research team. You have to go interview people, which is difficult to do. You have to go on location sometimes to get those videos, as opposed to just using stock footage that already exists. And so, because it's expensive to do these kinds of stories, you don't often see it on the CNN or Fox style news. And the other thing that a couple of you noted, it's way more boring. They don't care about the entertainment value so much with a hard news story. It's about informing viewers. And PBS, I think, is a great example of this. So listen, my goal is not to to try to convert you and say, you need to only listen to PBS News. Like, you can listen to whatever news you want. This here's America. What I was trying to give you a sense of is what hard, good quality news looks like. I personally think that PBS is the place you can find it most often. It's not to say you can't find it on CNN or Fox. Like, you definitely can. It just takes more legwork from you, because you have to sift through all the bad information in order to find the good quality news. PBS is just straight good quality news for the entire hour. That's the other thing that's kind of interesting. The PBS is only 1 hour long, and yet they have more information and more depth packed into that hour than you get on the 24-hour news networks. They have an unlimited amount of time to cover information in a quality way. They just don't do it because it's not interesting to viewers. Hopefully, you saw this when I put on the post. PBS is funded by 3 different areas. Number 1, the government. It's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Private donations, viewers like you can get a tote bag. And then 3, corporations. And so PBS usually gets accused of bias from both directions. Liberals say that they don't do enough to go after corporations because that's where they get their money. And then conservatives say that PBS doesn't do a good job because they get funding from the government. That probably tells you they're doing things right if everybody's angry with them, because it means that they're probably giving it to both sides the way they deserve to if the story requires it. And because they don't need viewers, they don't care if you watch. Their money doesn't come from sales of advertising. It comes from corporate sponsors, and it comes from the government. They don't need you to watch. So how does that affect the quality of their news? Well, they can just give you good information all the time. And I think if you look at your ratings for the differences between the two, hopefully you'll see evidence of that. Now, one thing I saw from people a couple of times is, well, it's just the same information, so I didn't learn much. I think that's fair. I think the circumstances of what is going on in the world certainly dictates that all of the news that everybody's covering will be the same. I also think that to an extent, if you watched the Fox and PBS first, and then, or excuse me, the Fox and CNN first, and then went to PBS, you're saying, well, this was the same info. Well, yeah, but they're not assuming that you watched, 3 different versions of the same story. So that's part of the reason the information is the same. One other thing about PBS. I had a comment that was a great comment. It went a little fast for me. That is true. Let me pull up their main page. Part of what they do is they'll spend the first 8 or 9 minutes covering all the stories of the day. And so it goes really, really quickly because they're giving you, 1 minute per headline of the things you need to know. And then what they will do for the remaining 50 minutes or whatever is they will cut their stories into major segments. Okay, and so if you look here, you've got an 8-minute segment, a 4-minute, a 7-minute, a 6-minute. And I would say that that's pretty standard operating procedure for PBS. You'll get your first half of the show, I shouldn't say half, excuse me, your first 10 minutes of the show, which is the major stories of the day. And then they will pick 5 or 6 stories to hit in depth. And so I encourage you at some point to take a look at the later half of an episode of the News Hour so that you can see what that looks like. They never on CNN or Fox cover a story for more than a minute or two, not unless it's an opinion section of the show. And so, again, PBS is going to provide that in-depth kind of a coverage so that you have better understanding of the issues. All right, last little bit, let's take a look at some of your quotes. I thought, most of you were spot on. A couple of you had talked about the information was the same, but I thought these quotes were very representative of the kinds of things I got. Never watched PBS, but it was better. The quality of information was better. I learned more. I'd never watched this show before, but I thought it was really good. Again, this is America. You can watch whatever news network you want, but I'm hoping to show you the difference between what cable news looks like and what good quality news looks like. I also saw a lot of this, and I think you're correct. It was boring. Man, those anchors are awful. Yep, their goal is not to entertain you. Their goal is to provide you with the news, and so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's really great information if you can stay awake long enough to make it through an episode. That's why when I do PBS, I look for stories that are new or stories that I'm looking to get more information about from the sidebars, and I only watch those stories rather than watch the entire episode. That's what's nice about using their site. You can pick and choose the stories that you want to see. Here are the graphs of your responses, and they came out exactly the way I had hoped they would come out. And perhaps my guess would be if you could go back and change your ratings for cable news after seeing what good news looks like, my guess is you would rate it even lower now, now that you saw the comparison of what good news looks like. But even so, how much do you feel like you understood the stories that you saw? Here's what you said for cable. Here's what you said for PBS. Okay, very clearly an increase in the number who thought I know a lot more about these stories now. Second question, how much smarter did you get? Our graph is, kind of middle of the road here. From cable, switch over to PBS, and it skews much higher. I got a lot smarter. I learned a lot from having watched this. And then third, based on our criteria from the doc on Tuesday, what would be the quality rating that you would give to the cable news? Okay, it seems like 7 was the high point, 6, 7, 8, kind of a perfect bell curve there. Again, my guess is maybe that would change if you went back and evaluated a second time. But as I move to PBS, clearly the rating is skewed much, much higher. PBS is higher quality news. So that's the goal of all this at the end of the day. I personally like PBS. And the reason I like it is because it's the place that you can find this good quality news the most often. And I think your results would confirm that. So I appreciate your effort on this stuff over the last 3 days. Enjoy your spring break. We'll talk to you on Monday.